Um, I will now call the January 7th, 2021 meeting of the Saugerty Zoning Board of Appeals to order. And it is, give or take, 7:10 p.m. Kevin has started recording. I will begin with a roll call of the members of the zoning board. I am Jeannie Goldberg. I am chairperson of the ZBA. Also present are Patty Kelly, vice chairperson, Tim Scott, Joe Mayone, Henry Rua, and an alternate, Holly Strutt. Since we have more than 3 members, we officially have a quorum. We have our 5 regular board members plus 1. So the meeting may begin. We have 2 items on our agenda for tonight's meeting. The first item is a new appeal brought before the zoning board for an area variance. This appeal is brought by Jonathan Delson, who is requesting a lot line adjustment before the planning board, but requires an area variance from the zoning board before the planning board can consider his application. This will be presented by Mr. Delson's representative, Dan McCarthy, unless Mr. Delson would like to present himself, but I have asked that it be limited to 10 minutes because we also have a long continued public hearing for the rest of the meeting. Mr. McCarthy, do you wish to start?
Okay, my name is Dan McCarthy. I'm with Praetorius and Conrad, and I'm representing Mr. John Delson. Tonight, at the zoning board, as Ms. Goldberg said, this is an area variance. This is 2 parcels presently. Both parcels have houses on them. The zoning in this area is 1 acre zoning. And with these 2 combined parcels as they exist now, it's 1.933 acres. So one of these parcels is and meets the zoning area, and the other one does not. The problem that we have here tonight that I'm presenting is that parcel that does have more than 1 acre has that existing house on it. And that existing house is a little more than 4 feet onto encroaching the other parcel that we're talking about here. And what is presently happening is that both parcels are owned by the Delphins. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to sell the parcel that the existing house is encroaching into, but they can't because of a problem with the title insurance on this particular problem of a house that's encroaching onto that parcel that they're trying to sell. So one of the solutions is we decided to go to the planning board workshop, and the workshop strongly advised that we bring this to the zoning board. They understood the problem, that there was we'd have to do a lot line change of some sorts, but we are under restraints already because of the zoning requires 1 acre minimum, and that would mean that the one that's already under 1 acre, a pre-existing non-conforming, would get less acreage, not by much, but a little bit. What we're trying to do is resolve the problem. So what I've designed here was we're going to take and add a new lot line that would be about 10 feet into the parcel that the house is encroaching into. And what that would do is that would give the house that's encroaching enough room so that they could put up a fence, they could do anything they'd like. They have a propane tank back there right now that's also encroaching into that house, the other parcel, and they'd be able to easily get in and out of there. It's not a good situation, but we're trying to make it work so that they can sell this parcel off. And the new buyer would be able to get some title insurance on it. So that's the case. That's what's going on there. If there's any questions, please bring them up. I have one last thing I wanted to ask was, I did submit maps. Does the board have those maps, the board members? So, okay, good.
Yes. They were sent to everyone.
Very good. All right, and as I said, this is it's a pre-existing non-conforming, but we're trying to make a bad situation better. That's what we're trying to do here. The house lot that is encroaching would gain more area, and the one that is being encroached on, all right, which I call parcel one, that one there is going to receive less than what it already has, which is non-conforming. By the way, this was a condition that was brought before them back in 1990, and they had a variance done, and it was accepted because it had no impact. And I bring that up because that's the situation here, I believe, too, that this would have no, it doesn't impact these two people here. I realize the constraints, but I also want to bring that into consideration. What we are doing, again, is we're taking a situation that already it existed before we arrived on the scene to do the surveying. They put the addition on there thinking that they used the marker that they thought was correct at the time when they put the addition on years ago, but they didn't have a survey done, and now we come along when they wanted to sell that parcel, and the new prospective buyer asked us to do the survey, and that's when this whole thing was revealed. So then it's gone to this level, where Mr. Delson hired us to take it to this, the next step. There it is.
I just like to.
Okay, Mr. Dalton, yes?
Well, this is Lanny Walter.
Oh, Mr. Walter, yes.
Very briefly, as you can see from the drawing, the house and driveway and everything, including even the garage or barn, is at the southern end of the lot parcel one, and between the barn and the house where Delson is completely an old scraggly wooded area, so that there really would be no impact.
There's nothing there.
I mean, there's nothing there. The buyer, and we have a contract, is present and has, as far as I understand, no objection to this shift in the lot line. And we would really very much appreciate if you would agree to this. Then we can, this is where Pauline Delson used to live. A 103-year-old lady died, and that's why the property's now for sale.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone on the zoning board have questions or comments?
Yes, Janie, this is Henry.
Yes, Henry.
For Torres and Conrad stated that there was a variance in 1990. What was the variance?
What was the variance? It was an
Correct.
area variance.
What's that?
It was an area variance because what happened was Irving and Pauline had given John, their son John, the house lot that we're referring to that is to the north of where they were going to reside, where Pauline was living. And what they did was they realized after there was a land exchange and some mapping done that these two lots themselves were undersized, that they didn't amount to 1 acre each, that they were undersized at the time. So at that time there was an area variance also. So as I said, Henry, in the very beginning was that the total amount of area between the two lots is 1.933 acres. That's between the two of them. So we needed 2 acres if we were going to go with the correct zoning, but we're already undersized. So that's what they went into at the time in 1990. And so what they agreed to was a subdivision on it, and they allowed it.
And the fact that that variance was not correct, or whoever, when they passed that, there must not have been a survey or anything on it. I mean, it was just granted arbitrarily.
No, can I, Dan, may I just?
Thank you.
And back in 1990, it was surveyed. In fact, there was some property conveyed by Walter Solway House to John Delson, make the lot legal. And it was, as Dan said, it's 0.91 acres or something like that.
1 point.
Okay.
And so it was, and the subdivision, the Solway House subdivision was approved, and in August 8th of 1990, the zoning board agreed to allow the parcel 1 to be slightly under 1 acre, and now we're asking to take a sliver of that so that this house can exist
What
and
changed from
the sale can go through.
Henry, if I may say something. Henry, if I may say something here. All right, when we were hired, Pretorius and Conrad, to do the survey, I did the mapping myself on this. When the field crew came back, what we had was a telephone pole that was in the inside in the deeds description, and we had stone wall out there on the north side of all this land here to go by to find out. In other words, when the Delsons wanted to put the addition in, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't have much to go by. They didn't have a marker that was set in place that was what we found to be in the correct spot. So
when was that put on? When was the addition?
I don't know who did that. You know, that was done sometime in the early 90s, I suppose, or I don't know when that survey was done.
After the variance was granted, correct?
Maybe Lanny can answer that.
No, the surveys were done before, and then they came forward.
Lanny, where do you come into this area? Are you an attorney for them?
I'm attorney for Mr. Delson, and I also was a former owner of Solway House, which is right next door here.
Well, you didn't say that, so that's why I didn't understand where your connection was. But I have no problem. I'm just asking the question.
No, that's all right.
Thank you.
Jeannie, may I ask a quick?
I'm sorry, Patty?
Since we're going to have to be a public hearing, it would be kind of important if we talked about some of these things, if indeed there's public that's interested in it next month, so that we can include them in the discussion should they arrive. So maybe we could just set the public hearing.
Yes, we have 5 minutes left according to my little timer here. But what I wanted to say is it's possible that some of the maps did not get to people because they were not sent until late, and especially people who might have been traveling, Henry. Have you seen the
Yeah,
map?
I mean, I have no, and I have no internet data, so I'm flying by just what you folks are saying.
Right.
No.
Okay, we'll have to get the maps to you before. But as Patty said, for all zoning board appeals, we must set a public hearing. So I
Correct.
would take a motion to set a public hearing for our next meeting, which is February 1st.
So moved.
A second?
I'll second. It's Joe.
Second.
Joe?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. Then we're going to do a roll call. Patty?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We will, for every public hearing, it is necessary that the applicant send certified letters, return receipt required to everyone within 500 feet of the property line. We will get a list of names and addresses to you within the next couple of days with a sample letter for you to send to everyone. It will be necessary then for you to give us a list of who has replied and that you have gotten the receipt cards back from before our public hearing is held. If you have any questions about that, you can contact our secretary, Mr. Freeman, or myself.
Can you send that list to me, please, Lanny Walter?
I certainly can, Mr. Walter.
Thank you. Over.
Will you please
Lanny, are you gonna handle
send
it?
me
Yeah.
your email, and you three can work this out among yourselves, okay?
Yep.
But we will send it to Mr. Walter.
Yeah, look, I will send it
Lanny.
to you in digital form. Just so you'll receive an Excel spreadsheet with all the pertinent, people within 500 feet, as well as the sample letter, and then just print out the letter and send it, return receipt requested, and just provide us somehow with documentation that the green cards have been returned.
Right. You have my email, right?
Yes.
We probably have your email, so we can one way or the other. I promise we will get in touch in the
Great.
next few days. The required date is the 22nd of January. It must be sent before or by that date. It will also be put in the paper, the newspaper, Hudson Valley One, by the zoning board. Is there anything else on this appeal? If not, I'm going to move right along. And the three of you gentlemen are welcome to stay or depart. It's up to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Good night.
Good night.
Get the exit on top.
We now move on to the application by Tarpon Towers LLC, Tarpon Towers 2 LLC, and Cellco Partnership, ZBA, Verizon Wireless. Before we start this, I'm going to designate Holly Strutt, our alternate, to join the regular board for this meeting and vote, as Henry Rua, who's our regular board member, was not present for the initial 2020 Verizon cell tower presentations. Holly, will you join the board, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a plethora of papers here. The first item of business on this application regards the question that has been presented to the board as to whether this sorry, that was the end of the time for the first application. As to whether this application should be immune from our town zoning law. For convenience, we've been calling it the Monroe question, which is named for the court case Monroe versus the City of Rochester, which established the test we are mandated to apply in answering the question. The Monroe question essentially asks whether this project should be immune from having to comply with our town zoning law because the tower, as proposed, is proposed on property owned by a governmental entity, the Mount Marion Fire Department, which I guess is now going to be the MMFD. And because, as a telecommunications carrier, Verizon is considered to be a public utility under the law for the purposes of this question. We have received comment and legal arguments on this question from the applicant's attorney, from the attorneys for a group of neighbors in the proposed site, sorry. We have also held public hearing on the question and received public comment. We closed the public hearing on this part of the application at our October 5th, 2020 meeting and held the period for written comment open until October 13th, 2020. Over the course of the last year, this board made several requests of the applicant, seeking information about potential alternate sites for this tower in the nearby office light industrial zoning district. On or about December 15th, 2020, the applicant submitted to the board documents in response to our request. In those documents, the applicant identified 2 potential alternative sites in the OLI zone at 17 Industrial Drive and 37 Industrial Drive. These 2 sites are ones where the applicant has determined the landowners are open to hosting a tower. It appears from the materials submitted by the applicant that these 2 sites, while not ideal from the applicant's perspective, are technically feasible alternative sites. Hence, the time has come tonight for us to deliberate about the Monroe question and perhaps make a decision. Prior to this meeting, the members of the ZBA were provided with a proposed written decision for their review and consideration, and to help facilitate deliberation at tonight's meeting. The proposed decision discusses the facts of this case, as well as the 9 factors which we must consider in applying the Monroe Balancing of Interest test. Now, I will entertain a motion in the form of a resolution to adopt this written decision. The resolution we will read into the record. After the motion is read and seconded, I will ask the board members to deliberate upon the Monroe question, discuss, and upon the proposed motion and proposed written decision. Following that discussion, we will have a roll call vote on the proposed resolution to adopt the written decision. Now, if you are thoroughly confused, Patty and I are going to take turns reading the resolution. Fortunately for me, Patty is going to begin. Kevin, can you unmute Patty, please?
Okay, unmuted.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
No.
Oh,
Patty,
You're
we
muted
can't hear
again,
you.
Patty.
Love these meetings.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we
hear
can
me?
hear you.
Just don't touch
Okay.
anything.
Adopting the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the matter of the application of Tarpon Towers 2 LLC and Selco Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless with regard to the applicability of the Town of Saugerty zoning law to the proposed project pursuant to Section 245-38 of the Town of Saugerty zoning law and the Monroe Balancing of Interests test. Whereas Tarpon Towers 2 LLC Tarpon, Selco Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless, proposed to install and operate a new commercial telecommunications facility. This facility is proposed to be constructed on land owned by the Mount Marion Fire Department, Inc., or MMFD, and located at 766 Kings Highway in the town of Saugerties. For convenience, Tarpon and Verizon Wireless shall be referred to in this resolution collectively as Verizon. Upon information and belief that the Mount Marion Firehouse is a domestic New York State not-for-profit corporation which provides firefighting and emergency services responses to the community in the town of Saugerties. It is proposed that the MMFD will release a portion of its property upon which proposed communications facility would be constructed. The proposed facility includes the installation of a new 120-foot monopole structure, related antenna, and equipment necessary to close existing gaps in service in the local area and to relieve substantial capacity issues related to the increased demand and use of Verizon wireless network in the town. The MMFD property is located in the town's residential hamlet zoning district. A telecommunications facility is not a permitted use in that zoning district. Consequently, Verizon has applied to this board for a use variance and an area variance. No decisions have yet been rendered on those variance applications. By letter to the ZBA from its counsel dated August 21st, 2020, Verizon asked our board to determine whether the proposed action is immune from compliance with the town zoning law. We are authorized to make such determination pursuant to zoning law 245-38. which states that the ZBA shall decide any question as to the proper application of the zoning law to public and quasi-public projects and improvements under the Balancing of Interest Act text set forth in New York State Court of Appeals in a case entitled Matter of Monroe versus City of Rochester. The purpose of this balancing test is to determine which governmental interest should prevail when there is a conflict between the zoning ordinance of one political unit and the statutory authority of another unit to perform a designated public function. The test identifies 9 separate factors to be considered to determine whether a specific project qualifies for immunity from zoning. In this case, the conflicting government interests are those of the Mount Marion Fire District and Verizon Wireless in its role as a public utility, and the interests of the town of Saugerties. In the case of the Mount Marion Fire District and Verizon Wireless, there is a legitimate governmental interest in filling the gaps in coverage in the area where the facility is proposed. Another governmental interest fostered by the Mount Marion Fire Department and Verizon Wireless stems from making the proposed communications facility available to the MMFD and local police. The town of Saugerties has its own interests in connection with this proposed facility. The town's interest lies in its facilitating the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens, as well as in facilitating the protection and preservation of the town's environment and community. The regulation of land uses throughout the town via the town's comprehensive plan and zoning law in one way the town accomplishes these aims. We have held a public hearing spanning several sessions on this issue. We received comments and legal arguments from Verizon and from a group of concerned neighbors to the MMFD site. We have also received comments from other members of the community. The public hearing for the Monroe question was closed at our meeting in October 5th and held open for written comments until October 13th. We have carefully considered all the material and comments submitted to the board relative to the Monroe question and have had assistance from counsel. Attached to this resolution will be a proposed written decision of the ZBA. This document states our determination on the Monroe decision and includes detailed reasoning in support of that decision. Jeannie, I give it to you.
Thank you. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Town of Saugerties ZBA as follows. We adopt the proposed written decision in this matter dated January 7th, 2021, a copy of which is attached hereto and made a part hereof. Our attached written decision is a detailed document comprising approximately 16 pages, which sets forth an in-depth analysis of the issue presented, states our decision, and explains our reasoning. Copies of this decision will be made available to Verizon and to the public via posting of the decision on the town website as soon as possible after the ZBA meeting. Not tonight, folks. In order to save time, we will not read our entire decision this evening, but for the reasons set forth in the decision, we determine as follows. To the best of our ability, we have examined this application and the record before the ZBA, and we have applied the 9 factors of the Monroe Balancing of Interests test to the facts presented in this case. Having done that, it is our determination that the interests of the town of Saugerties that would be protected by an application of the town's zoning law to this case should prevail over the governmental interests of the MMFD and Verizon. As explained more fully, much more fully, in our decision, we find that a majority of the factors of the Monroe test favor a decision that this application should be subject to compliance with the zoning law. Key to our decision is the fact that in this particular case, there are technically feasible alternative sites in the nearby office light industrial OLI zoning district where this facility could be located. The potential to locate this proposed facility in one of those alternative sites in that zone would mean that the facility would be much more in harmony with Saugerties zoning law, because that law allows those facilities in the OLI district. This means that siting the facility in that zone would be more in line with Saugerties' vision for how it should grow and be developed and safer for the community. At the same time, while the alternative sites may not be ideal, the materials submitted by Verizon on the sites in the OLI zone show that these sites have the potential to generate much of the public benefit that would be provided by a facility at the MMFD site in terms of coverage and capacity. And Tarpon has said that the facility will be available to fire and police, even if the facility is sited on land other than the Mount Marion Fire Department property. Thus, that benefit is not lost if an alternative site were to be utilized. Therefore, even with the application of the zoning law to this project, most of the public benefits presented by the project are preserved. Finally, we determine that there are significant fact differences which distinguish this case significantly from the facts of the Centerville Fire Company SBA Towers case. Thus, we are not bound in this case by precedent, by that decision. The ZBA further finds and determines that the application for a permit to construct a telecommunication facility at the MMFD site and the applications for use and area variances will be decided following the provisions outlined in the zoning law. May I have a motion to approve the resolution that Patty and I just read?
Joe, I'll make the motion.
The motion by Joe and a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Tim. We're going to do a roll call. I'll start with myself. I am in favor. Patty Kelly.
I am in favor.
Sorry, Henry is abstaining from this one.
Hey, Jeannie, I think John is trying to say something, but we can't hear him.
Oh.
He was just waving at the screen.
Kevin, can you unmute John, please?
I cannot. He's unmute. He should be unmuted now.
Can you unmute yourself, John?
We can't hear you. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, he is muted. I see the icon, but I can't unmute anybody, unfortunately. Now you're unmuted, John. Don't touch anything. No.
No.
Can you type in the chat box?
And then someone can read it.
Kimberly, can you get in touch with John, or are you able to see if you can find out what he needs to tell us?
Yeah, I'm texting him now.
Okay, I would like to hear from John, one of our attorneys, before we continue. In some way.
I see something from John. To everyone, there should be discussion and deliberation before the board votes. Correct?
Okay.
Oh, I don't see that. Where did you see that, Kevin?
Jeannie, did you hear that?
I did.
It's in chat, but John sent it to me privately.
Okay.
So is that correct, John? You want to give the thumbs up? Did I get that right? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kevin.
Good step. We overlooked that step. Good step.
We did. I apologize. So before we continue our vote, we will have discussion. We should have had this after a second. So we had the ZBA. Do you have any discussion for any part of this resolution and the decision that goes with it?
I would just like to just say from my own me personally as a ZBA member, the things that were so important to me in terms of our decision was the fact that the industrial zone, or the light industrial zone, was so very close to where the Mount Marion firehouse was. So that was a major factor. And the other factor was there was no which way that we could get the setbacks to be, to work for this project, in my view. They just posed a safety issue, particularly the setback from the tower base to Glasgow Turnpike. And so those were issues that I couldn't get around. And the fact that we're able to still preserve the firehouse and the emergency services on a tower in the industrial zone, to me, was important. That's just some of my thinking on this.
I agree with Patty. I feel the same way.
That's Joe?
Yes, it's Joe.
Good, thank you. Tim, any discussion?
Sorry. Yeah, I would just reiterate what's been said.
We lost you.
Tim, you're not coming across.
Tim, can you unmute yourself?
Sure. Is my audio?
Yes, now it's back.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't glitched. Anyway, it seems like the worst possible route was just taken by Verizon here, and they knew it, and the message was just not going through that the industrial zone is right here. You can put it here. It seems like over the past year, it's just been an unnecessary runaround from them to us, because I think we all knew what the outcome was going to be at the end of the day, even if we are open-minded going into this decision. That's really all I had to say for that.
Okay, I would like to speak as also a part of the zoning board. I was very concerned initially and continued to be about the small size of the circle that you explored to put the tower up, and that it did not include where the tower would be allowed. And I was never really satisfied with why that was such a small search ring. I also have been very concerned for the neighbors, for the fire department, for the police, for everyone. I understand that the communication is inadequate. So I certainly would like to have a tower up for everyone's safety. On the other hand, I am concerned about closeness to the neighbors for that 120-foot tower. So it was a real balancing of interest for me. But I agree with everything that Patty and I read tonight.
And Jean, can you just confirm, this is just for all the ZBA members, was everybody able to review the draft prior to tonight's meeting, the draft decision that we had drafted for your consideration and review?
The 16-page one?
Yes.
It was sent to everyone, and I'm sure everyone did their best to review it. And
I did review it, and I thought it was very thorough and reflected the concerns that we all have, and the fact that we do think there needs to be coverage for the gap in service in that area, and we really didn't ignore that. But I thought that the decision outlined our concerns very well.
This is Joe. I reviewed it and I thought it covered the points very well. And I like the way it was presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion before we continue to vote legally this time? Okay, I'm going to start. The motion was made and seconded. So I'm going to start again with a roll call vote. And since my name happens to be on here first, I will again say I am in favor of this resolution. After the discussion we've heard and everything we have read. Patty?
Yes.
Joe Mayone,
Yes, I'm in favor.
Jim Scott,
Yes.
and Holly Strutt.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Thank you. The motion and resolution are passed. The motion to approve the resolution. I believe that's the correct way to say it.
And the decision will be attached to that resolution as well.
The decision will be attached to it in our records. It will be sent to all the attorneys involved. And it will also be put up on the Saugerties, Town of Saugerties website as soon as possible. Now I'm missing a paper here. Sorry. Sorry, folks. I think I found it. Okay, Kevin, as ZBA secretary, will you post a copy of the resolution and the written decision on the town website as soon as possible, please?
Well, as soon as we get it to you.
Yep.
Yes,
I will take care of it.
fine, thank you. Okay, in light of our decision on the Monroe question, the next matter to be addressed on this application are the pending applications for a use variance and an area variance. The application, the public hearing for the variances has been continued to be open. Mr. Olson, would you like to address the board about how the applicant wishes to proceed in light of our decision on the Monroe question? We can see Mr. Olson, but we can't hear him now.
Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Sorry. We have the applications pending. I think it's up to the board to decide how to proceed, honestly. I mean, I'm not trying to skirt the question, but the applications are pending. We've provided justification for why we believe they should be approved. You already did the other resolution, and I guess I just want to apologize in the public to the fire department that we're sorry that you can't get some of the benefit that we intended to do. We apologize. We tried very hard. I hear what the ZBA member said about your decision, and I'm not going to rehash it because it's done and over with. So, but we do have a use variance application and an area variance application. We do have very technical information in the record from Mike Crosby, who, while he does say you could put a tower in the industrial zoning district, it is a different tower. It's a much taller tower, possibly. It's not going to avoid the need for for area variances. You're still going to need variances. You can't avoid that fact, and we've demonstrated that. What's that?
Possibly.
No, actually, definitely. We've done the mapping, and notwithstanding what Mr. Graves said about his opinion about the setback requirements, and I agree with him on the substance of that, but the ZBA just can't decide to change the setback variances without an application on that issue. So you need variances for that site. We think that the fire department is a good site, but like you said, saw in the materials that were provided, that if we're forced to go to the industrial zoning district, it's something that we can be done. You might have some very unhappy neighbors, though, because it may be more visible than the fire department. And I'm not sure the zoning board really took that into consideration, because it's in the backyards, the proposed site of some of these neighbors. And I think the zoning board's going to have to deal with that. But we have
Well,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mr. Olson, before you say things like that, we would like to see a detail of the site so that we would know where the tower is. We have not been given that. We were given two possible sites, but we don't know where those towers would be on those sites in the industrial zone.
That's not true. That's not true. The two maps that were provided, we actually had a surveyor go out there and provide them on the maps. They're listed on the maps, Patty.
I'll go look again. I'm sorry.
Thanks. And in the initial map that we showed, while it's a zoomed out version, you can see where, the parcel number 1 is what we call, what is labeled as address 17 industrial. That realistically is probably going to be the site that is something that we would pursue if we had to pursue it in this district, because we have a property owner that has actually signed a lease as of just, I believe, today. The other property owner has gone silent on us. So but if you look at parcel number 1 or 17, it's very close. It's in the backyards of a lot of these people. So that's something that you're going to have to address. But I guess I digress. I guess you have 2 pending applications before you on our behalf. So I think the board's going to have to make a decision on those.
But you're talking about the pending applications. Number 1, we're talking about the fire department property.
Correct. We have the use variance application for that property as well as area variances. Yeah, exactly.
Have you gotten a permit from the DEC for the encroachment on the wetlands?
No, that wouldn't be done until we finish the local land use zoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would do that after you were...
We're not, just for clarification, I apologize for interrupting. We're not encroaching upon any wetlands. It's the actual buffer zone.
Buffer zone. Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
which is different.
You're correct.
Thank you.
I beg your pardon.
That's not a problem. I just have to be very careful with the record, that's all.
As do I.
Of course.
So thank you.
You're welcome. So, so I think the board has an obligation to ultimately decide whether it wants to close the public hearing on these 2 pending applications and then proceed with a decision. To close that out. Or, alternatively, do we just work alternatives into this application? Because like I said, my clients are willing, they've been expressed a willingness to do something in the industrial or light industrial zone on Industrial Drive. That's more of a procedure question, I think, in terms of how you want to handle that.
I'm a bit confused because it's almost as if you're asking us to make decisions on area variances in 2 different places simultaneously. And then tonight, wait, let me finish, please. I'll get there. Tonight, you're saying that one of the 2 parcels that Sarah had sent us information on has gone silent. Does this mean that they no longer wish to do it? So we are down to 1 alternative site?
I can only tell you that they haven't responded. So I can't tell you what their intentions are because they haven't spoken about it recently to us.
But they spoke to you originally about it. They expressed interest.
Yes, but since they haven't responded to calls, we're making the assumption that they may not be interested any longer.
Well, it could just because of the holidays too, that they might not be there. So I wouldn't give up on them so quickly.
On the other hand, you have already signed a lease with number 17 Industrial Drive. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. That's what I was informed of today. I'm sorry. I don't believe it's fully executed. I believe that it's been signed by the landowner.
Correct, Scott.
Okay, I'll have to ask one of the attorneys to clarify what that means. It has been signed by the landowner, but it's not fully executed. It's a lease.
Correct.
So, Patty, with a contract, in order for it to be binding, it has to be signed by both parties to the lease. So it's only been signed by the landowner. It hasn't been executed by either Verizon or Tarpan, whoever would be the other party of it.
Thank you.
So, you know, John is trying to, can't get his mic running. Chat with me or the group.
Hello.
And Dan wants to talk.
Yeah, I think the procedure should be, John or one of the attorneys will certainly correct me, but I think it would be appropriate for the board to determine whether to proceed. They will proceed with the applications for the variances on the fire department
I agree.
site, which are there, and at the applicant's request, could abandon that consideration upon submission of a request for variances on the site in the OLI district. And at some point, the question of the lease will be resolved, but that would be the procedure, because I think a public hearing would have to be scheduled on the proposed relocated site in the OLI district.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that also, Dan.
I think that it would be a good idea for the Zoning Board of Appeals to vote to affirm or reject the area use and the use variances for the Mount Marion Fire Department before we get into the second possible site, which is lot number 17 at Industrial Drive. I think we have to finalize one first.
Can I interrupt for a second? What about this? And I haven't spoken to my clients about this, so I don't know. Hopefully I'm not misspeaking. But what if we what about keeping these applications pending while we pursue the industrial site property? Just because what if the industrial site property ultimately falls through and we come back to the fire department site, we don't lose time. You know, that way we wouldn't have all, for lack of a better term, wasted a lot of time. It wasn't wasted, you know what I mean?
I think that's appropriate as long as the applicant agrees to waive the time limits associated with the public hearing and action time after the public hearing.
Well,
Yeah.
And just, I'm sorry, this is Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Hearing is still open for the area variance and use variance. So no time clocks have started yet. Now, Jeannie, has the alternate site from Verizon been posted, or are they made available to the public?
I'm sorry.
Has the alternative site analysis is that available to the public to view? Because it might be beneficial for the public to also be able to view them.
Well, if and when we get to the point that we need to do variances on that, then that certainly would be. At this point, no, it has not been, unless
We have
Mr.
not
Olson, we have received the latest in December that had the map of the two possible parcels. But that has not been publicly posted yet.
Well, because we don't have any information about them other than that they were possibles. We don't have a request for variances. We have no idea of what type of variances are being requested for either site. So we have very little to work with until we receive an application for that site.
Bear in mind that
They need
that
type
site
5.
the site in the OLI district will require a
To the
special
planning.
use permit, which means it's got to go also before the
Planning
planning board.
Right. They're the
Yeah.
ones that make the ultimate decision, but the variances are something the ZBA has to deal with.
Correct.
If variances are required, yes. Excuse
I
me.
thought Mr. Olson had mentioned that, because I thought Patty had asked for some more visual details. I thought Mr. Olson had said that those had been provided. That's why I'm a little.
The only thing that was provided were those original possibilities of sites. That's all I've seen. I haven't seen anything else other than that.
I haven't either.
So the information, Kimberly, that we provided, and my response to Patty was, she was before suggesting that there was no location information for where the tower would be on these two possible sites, and I explained that actually the maps we provided showed the actual locations on the properties for each of those two possible sites. That's what I was referring to.
So
There's a site plan that's been provided, but none of the visual, no simulation such as was provided for the firehouse has been provided for that site.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't, I mean, again, for preservation of the record, that wasn't requested. I think that would have been extremely premature to provide at this time. So we gave the information I think that the board asked for to allow it to give consideration to the County of Monroe test and everything. And so that's where we are. Now, if we were to pursue the industrial site or light industrial site, yes, additional information would have to be provided.
Yes. I remember on the map on one parcel, the tower was in one very far corner of a 5-acre lot.
Correct, because the building unfortunately is in the middle of that lot, and that's
Right.
where the property owner, who has gone silent on us,
Oh, he said that's the one.
said it had to be there. They wouldn't agree to put it anywhere else.
Okay, well, there was some confusion as to the numbering of the industrial drive lots and as to whether they were lot 1 or 2 or 3. I remember that.
That's correct. I believe there was a typo on the address. I think lot 2 we referred to as 37 Industrial Drive, and I think it's 35 actually. So our apologies.
34.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know the address honestly, but I know there was a typo that came to our attention, and that we apologize for that.
Yes. No.
Scott, I'm looking right now at the lot number 17 that you were talking about, and it shows that your leased area is pretty much in the middle of that lot.
Correct.
So, and not really having, it's hard to understand what the implications would be in terms of the variance. So, but you're right. I do have the thing that shows the where the leased area would be.
Okay, good. I'm glad you have that. Thank you.
And there's dimensions on there, Patty, that show how far we are off each boundary line, which implicates that we would need the variance.
Right. Okay.
Believe me, if we could avoid the variance, we would avoid the variance.
So it's the first property off of Industrial Drive. If you were coming in from Kings Highway, it's the first property on the left off of Industrial Drive?
Yes.
Okay. But isn't there a business there that has a building in there too? Is that the next one over?
Nope, there's a building there. It's also shown on the exhibit. It's exhibit 2. Yep.
All right, so I know which one you're talking about. Okay.
Just a question, is that site, the one you're talking about now, the closest site to the initially proposed site?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it would be.
Because then you can look to my comments about information that I would hope to have from a radio frequency point of view, distances and things like that. But that's, I thought, was the closest one. Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
But that tower, I believe, would then be higher than the 120 foot at the fire department. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Oh,
By 60 feet?
you know, I don't know if it's 60 feet. I think in the analysis that was provided, Mike said, yeah, ideally, if it was 60 feet taller, that would be great. But he said that he could come down to maybe 150 if I remember correctly.
That's correct. In the same spirit as the proposal at the Mount Marion Fire Department, we're proposing what we determined to be the minimum height necessary. So when we ran the comparative analysis, if we were to build a tower at 180 feet at the 17 Industrial Drive location, that location and height would be equivalent to the coverage of all the primary coverage objectives that we would have out of Mount Marion Fire Department. And so what we're trying to do here is we recognize that that lot is smaller. In fact, what I'm looking at shows about 151 feet. While that's not an influencing factor in the RF determination, it does work out that where that site placement on the property is roughly about the height of the tower away from the closest property line. So I think that while we're proposing the minimum height necessary, I think that works well with the board's hopefully future review of that setback and what the actual requirements are.
How many acres is that lot, Michael?
I don't know that I have that in front of me. That might be something
I
more
believe
for
it's
Sarah.
5.05.
Yeah, all of them were over 5.
We're 5, yeah.
And you're proposing to lease 100 by 100 square foot, which is considerably larger than the one at the fire department.
Yes, the 100 by 100 is actually the typical size lease area that the industry goes for. But I think because of their space concerns with the fire department, it was a little smaller.
Yeah. Okay. So,
well, they're actually, since we're still talking about the fire department, there were 2 different figures. One was 150 square feet and for a 30 by 60. And that didn't add up or multiply up for me. It's 180 square feet, right?
Oh, the lease area for on the fire
Correct.
department. I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't
Two
recall.
different things.
You know,
It said 2 different things.
we could obviously something we can check if we need to check on
Right.
to clarify anything. But it was definitely a smaller lease area, no question about it.
so my understanding, Scott, is what you're saying is you don't want to really proceed full hog on the industrial road one because you don't know what we're going to be doing on the fire department in terms of the variances. If that's the case, then it's our job to facilitate that and make a decision as soon as possible on the variances, so you will know and Tarpon Towers will know where you stand and what you have to do. Is that correct?
Well, actually, I think it's just the opposite of what you said, and I think we know where the board stands. I mean, I think it, you know, I could be wrong, but I think we know where you're going. And what I'm trying to say is, no, we'll pursue the industrial site because I think we don't have much of a choice. But for some reason, if that falls through and you've already issued a decision on this one, then we have to come back to this one, start all over again. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just trying to preserve the status quo in case we need it to avoid spending extra time and money redoing an application if the need ever comes to be.
All right. Well, then that takes me to Ron's concerns, which I want to address in his memo to the zoning board, is that we need more complete data on the proposed, at least the one that you have the lease almost signed with, so that we can do those how do you frame it, Ron? The hatch tags or something so that we can see what's covered in your original proposed and what will be covered here, and so that we have a better idea of what the situation is.
Actually, just to keep things simple, I had proposed, Mike has done a yeoman's job in presenting what coverage would be from a site. he then overlays it on the existing coverage. And where he has gaps, he shows that it's highlighted in red hash or orange hash, whatever that color is. And quite frankly, even as an RF engineer, it's somewhat difficult to look at and say, what site is that actually that's missing the coverage or not getting the coverage? And I took a little different approach, and like it or not, it was a different approach to consider. We know that Mike, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I'll try, believes that the coverage from the firehouse at 121 feet or 120 feet, whatever it is, center of radiation, meets all of their needs. In other words, it fills in all of the gaps that they think they have. So my thought is why are we looking at the coverage maps if we know that the gold standard in this case is the coverage he gets from the fire station? Why not just propagate the other sites? Now it's perhaps only one site, but perhaps two. The other sites at different heights and compare the coverage from those sites versus the gold standard height, which is from the firehouse. That way, you're not looking at complicated coverage maps and hash or anything else. If one circle is 3 inches, and this is not what it is, but if one circle is 3 inches in diameter and the other is 2 7/8, but it's clear that the one that's 3 inches is better than the 2 7/8. And that way you're not worrying about other areas. I just think, and maybe I'm simplifying this too much, but I'm not certain that and perhaps this board is different from other boards I've worked with, that you have the 100% capability and ability to understand these coverage maps. And I'm not belittling you, but they're difficult for me too, looking at hatches. And if you just said, okay, this is what they like, now let's see what the other one does. Is there any significant difference? And then you do that, and then you say, okay, now, but I have to move that, and does that impact it? That's all. I thought that was easier, but if it isn't, then the applicant would like to proceed with their other way. I can't tell them how to present their case. I was just trying to make it easier for the board. That's all, and for me, by the way.
Ron, I believe that makes perfect sense because that's been a controversy on numerous occasions. Where is the coverage, the overlap, and everything else? And what you just said makes real good, just good common sense, and very easy to understand at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I think whatever's easiest for both the board and the public to look at and have an understanding of, I think is the best remedy for something like this.
Well, I think that in Mike, my report to your board, that it's critical that to truly understand this, and I'll be quiet then, to know what the ground elevation is at each of these sites. I mean, you're saying, well, where's the tower located? I can see where the tower is located, but I do not know from a 7.5 minute topographic map what the ground elevation there, because that's very important. Because if the ground elevation is 50 feet lower than at the firehouse, that's a significant difference and will impact coverage.
No, I can tell you this here. It's not lower.
Okay, but if it's the same height, so we have a push. The other question is how far away is it? Is it 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,500? Where does that difference become a lack of significant figures, a lack of a de minimis difference between here and there? If it's a tiny difference because of the entire accuracy of this entire calculated processing, it may be, wow, it's a push, but I don't know that, and I can't advise on that. But I just made those suggestions to keep it simple. But it really is up to your board and also up to the applicant as the kind of evidence they want to present. I will say, just remember one more time, the applicant has demonstrated, in my professional opinion, that it has a dearth of coverage in certain areas and perhaps greater a dearth of coverage in other areas. But it's unclear at this point which alternate site, if there is an alter site, would meet that need. That's all.
What intervals, Ron, would you be looking for if the applicant were to follow through on your idea for covering that delta between what? What heights?
Okay, a great question, because Mike had said that the ideal height, and he may very well be right. I'm not questioning that. Hey, 180 feet is a flamethrower. That does great. And man, if I could have everything in the world, I'd take 180 feet. But he was attempting, I believe, to be cooperative or to be realistic and say, you know what, I can get by with 150 feet. And I think it was something like that, 154 center of radiation. I don't remember right now, but let's just say, for example, that's it. So I would use that old thing that we've done many times. You do a 20-foot difference because the model cannot detect 10 feet. So you see the difference in height. So you do it 170, you do one at 150, and you do one at 130. And then you compare that to the proposed site, and we can't change that one. That's what's proposed for. And what is that, Mike? 114, 115, 116, I think, right?
116, yeah, whatever the height is of the tower is 4 feet less. So in the case of the 180 example, that was a 176 center line. In the case of the 150 tower, it would be 146 foot center line. So if we can just talk in tower heights, I can make the ACL adjustment and make it simpler for everybody, and using the even numbers there. So I think 20 feet is reasonable. I think for the purposes of trying to be as clear as possible, I would suggest 30 feet be used, so 180, 150, and 120. That way we're talking similar heights to what's already proposed as well, which is what we've evaluated.
I just point out, I mean, I'm not going to argue with you, but in all the other analyses, the Verizon typically uses a 20-foot difference in height. You can't use 10. The model won't detect 10. We all agree on that. And the 10 will be where another carrier would be located. So, do what you want there. As I said, I can't tell you, I can only recommend. But what is important to me is, what is the linear distance and the azimuth from the proposed site, the azimuth, in other words, which way the compass points, from the proposed site to the alternate sites, if there are, and then what is the distance? Is it feet? Is it miles? Is it inches? I don't know. And then what is the difference in ground elevation? And that only can be turned by a surveyor, or I'd be happy just with a 7.5-minute topographic map, which are pretty good. Okay.
Ron, we'd be happy to provide all that information, and just to reiterate, to try to maintain some continuity with our expectations. The memo that I provided for December 15th was in answer to the previous questions at the last meeting that we had, where the questions that were really the main topics were: are there other locations in the industrial zone that are, number one, available, and number two, do they work, and if so, what is the form factor? And so that letter and the answers that we've provided are specifically to address those questions. So think of this as that letter as an executive summary, with the full expectations that as we move forward with an alternate location, we will be providing any and all details that's requested like that. So all those questions are perfectly fine. We just obviously don't have all that detail. We'll have our A&E folks at Tectonic provide, as Ron mentioned, the surveyed or what they're able to from a desktop, high quality program, be able to provide those distances and azimuths and ground elevations. And we have looked at all that just preliminarily for tonight's meeting, but obviously our correspondence was very recent, so we didn't want to spring anything at the last minute as far as trying to answer those right before the meeting, and then not everybody having had a chance to review. So we certainly look forward to answering those questions.
Okay, and just to keep, if you would entertain this, or if the board would like to entertain it, to keep what I believe is at this point the simplest altered analysis, is forget about the existing coverage. We've already said 116 feet center of radiation at the fire department works for you, and it covers all the areas you need, and it provides the data relief that you need at the different frequencies. And just to say, okay, at this other site, what is the minimum height necessary, and compare those two so the board can see that. I just think that it's a KISS situation, keep it simple, stupid. So, and I don't mean this to say anything about the board, but I'm sorry, if you look at something, you see one is a big egg and the other's a little egg, it's intuitively obvious to the most casual observer that the big egg is better than the little egg. And no matter where it is. So if we could give that a try as a start, and if it looks like it's a push or it's close, then we can get into the second round of this, Mike, if we really have to, that you do a more thorough analysis and do your hatching thing, which by the way, hatching things on computers are tough. It's always nice to have hard copies of things, as I've always said, and someday I'll get hard copies of things and I'll be able to talk about that, but that's another thing. Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. So we
Okay, can I
are,
ask, Gene, can I
please,
ask a question?
please, John.
So Scott, please pardon me because I missed a little bit of what you said. I was trying to get my mic operating again, which I will just, so there are no aspersions cast on Kevin, was a total pilot error by me. But anyway, I missed what you were saying when you proposed, you were talking about a path forward regarding, what to do about the application at the Mount Marion Fire Department site versus proceeding with the investigation or, figuring out how to look further at the 17 Industrial Drive site. Can you just tell me again what your thought was?
Sure. Excuse me. My thought was that we possibly place the current applications on hold pending our review and additional due diligence of the other possible alternative sites, one of which seems more likely than not. But my thought process is we don't know exactly what's going to happen with that other site. I'm assuming it's going to be fine, but you never know. And we've put so much time and effort into this. What if something goes wrong with that site and we have to fall back to this one? Keep it open, available, so that if the board were to issue a decision, and if that decision was to deny the variances, we would have to start anew. That was my thought process, since what we did so far with 17 and 34 Industrial Drive seems to be, a preliminary executive summary, like Mike said. So we still have more work to do. So let's not kill this option if we don't have to. Not that we're necessarily coming back to it, but just it's there in case it needs to be there.
Understood. Thank
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, so we still have an open public hearing on the use variance and the area variances for the firehouse. We can close that since we are now into variance language. We then have 62 days to make a decision.
So can I make a
I would like to hear from the board and John.
Gene, can I make a suggestion about this? I think, well, you can talk with your members of the board to see what your feelings are, because you're the decision makers. But I think there is something to be said for what Scott is proposing. I would like the opportunity to sort of think through that a little bit more. But my suggestion to you was going to be to continue the public hearing over to your February meeting. I know you've got a very crowded agenda on that meeting, but with other things. But the public is now aware of the submissions that have been made by Verizon in this case, and those materials can be available to the public, and give an opportunity for the public to speak to, maybe issue some comments on those materials and the alternate sites that are proposed in there. And it's possible perhaps too that maybe some additional information may come forward from the applicant with regard to the sites that are proposed. And in the interim, the board, we can think about, these competing paths and think about what makes the most sense, and perhaps make a decision at the meeting in February about whether you want to close the public hearing and make a decision on the use variance application, or whether it does make sense to just reach an agreement with the applicant to set this aside for the moment and see if something positive can develop in regard to the alternatives. And I think what is an advantage to what Scott's proposing, in my opinion, is that I think a better understanding of what is out there in terms of being practically possible with regard to the alternative sites would be helpful information to inform your ultimate decision on the use variance, because that's something that does bear on the decision that you'd be making about the use variance. So it might be nice information to have in hand, in the same way that it was very helpful for the board to have the alternate site information that Verizon submitted in December in making its decision on the Monroe question. Well, you're sorry I found my mic, aren't you?
Can I ask a question of John and of the board members, or maybe Scott? If we are keeping open the public hearing, does that mean you're still asking us to consider the variances, or are you asking us to table them? In which case, are we inviting members of the public to speak about them?
Well, I think that if I may, and Scott may have his own thoughts on this, but I think that you would be doing both, actually. You would, I think that you would, at the February meeting, you'd reopen the public hearing, or have a public hearing session and accept comment on the alternate sites. I think it'd be interesting for you to have comments from the public and the neighbors if they have something to say about those sites, just to get a sense of things going forward. But then you would just keep the public here. I would keep the public hearing open again, or suspend it while it's open. And then that application would just sit on the table until further, the further investigation was done with the cooperation of the applicant on the alternate site that they're looking at. I hope that makes sense to you.
So how can we have the public comment or ask questions about the alternate sites when there's no application yet?
Well, there isn't an application, but a package was submitted on December 15th with some information. Okay. And at least a couple of sites have been identified, and so there is something to grab onto there.
Thank you.
I have to say, John, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Good. COVID has made this very difficult in many ways for everyone, and I understand that. Usually we would say that the public is free to come in and examine the records at the building department. The building department is now closed, but they're open only for appointment, and it's very difficult to have records examined by the public. So we're going to have to think of some way to have these these records accessible to the public that doesn't involve everybody touching, going, wearing masks or not wearing masks.
But normally the way that our other municipal clients are doing it is to post those documents on the town website. I don't know if the ZBA has a page here, but
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Those December 15 documents are not huge documents. So
no, but added to the 16-page, the other one.
I know, but if
no, we can.
If they're put up on the website, anybody
individually
can access them and download them.
Correct.
So now, Scott, where's Scott? Oh, there he is. Now that you have signed a lease, or sort of signed a lease with that one property, are you comfortable that we would then share that with the public, put that on the website? Because before it was just something you were looking at, but you didn't have any definitive thing. So if it's all right with you, as a proposed site, we will put that on the website.
Yeah, the information that we provided about
Yes.
those sites. Yeah, that's part of the public record right now for this application. I think that the public is entitled to
Even
that.
property that you haven't gotten any confirmed from, you would,
Only because, yes, it's in
Okay.
the record of this application. So I have no objection. And when it was submitted with the understanding that the public would have access to it.
okay.
Yeah.
You let us know if you've finished the lease for that.
Of course.
Thank you. All right. And
You're
so
welcome.
I mean,
it's my understanding, just to be clear, there's no penalty to the ZBA to put your Mount Marion Firehouse on hold while you are exploring the possibility of the property on Industrial Road. There will be no repercussions in terms of that.
Yeah, that's certainly my opinion with respect to
Okay.
the use and area variances that are
Correct.
going to be put on hold. That's correct.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
May I ask another question, please? It's Ron.
Yes.
And Scott, I guess you were in the process of negotiating a lease or an option and lease agreement. Typically, you do with another landowner for this. And just wondering from the point of view of past applications that I've reviewed in countless municipalities, even though the tower isn't going on a firehouse or a police station or a public works building, the applicants typically, and I use one that we see all the time and you know them, will allow the public safety users in the area to co-locate on the proposed structure, even if it's not at the firehouse. And it was just a question that the board might be helpful because they're concerned about the firehouse too, I think, that if this is the chosen site for some reason, that they can have a good conscience that the fire company will still be able to improve its communication systems.
So I think Brett Bugelin referred to answer that question previously. I don't think the answer has changed, and that was his policy. The Tarpon's policy is they allow that to occur. Now, I think that I don't mean to get into another issue. I'm not the expert here. The question is whether the fire department would even utilize a tower on another property away from its facility. So if I'm not mistaken, you have to run cables and wires, and that's beyond my, I guess, job description. I don't know if that would ever happen.
Typically, in a case like this, the applicant would allow the public safety to co-locate at the location, and then just to have an antenna on the proposed tower. Yeah, there might be a telephone line between the dispatch point and where the communications antenna was located, but it doesn't have to be at the fire station. In fact, most of the applications I review, it's never at the exact fire station, it's somewhere else, but they say, fine, we'll let you co-locate here, and then we'll even give you a space next to our building or in our building. I mean, it really depends on the applicant, and I'm not telling the applicant what to do. I just think it makes for good neighbors, or, it's a good thing when a tower company especially is willing to reach out and offer the community the benefits of having a tower in an area. That's all.
No, again, I think, sorry, go ahead, Brett.
This is Brett Bugelin. We've made this policy clear, I think, in writing and in the various hearings that we provide that space for $0 on availability to public safety, whether that's fire, police, etc. We've never changed that. We're not going to pay for people's equipment. We're not going to pay to bring it over. We're not going to pay for that type of thing because that simply is not our expertise and not in our purview. And typically that equipment carries some sort of warranty and other installation requirements that we just don't do. And I appreciate the board considering Scott's proposal. Obviously, Scott, I think we would need to toll the shot clock as well if that's applicable in this case, but I guess the attorneys can work that out. I wanted to just real quickly, not to prolong the agony here tonight, but we've gone and pursued the industrial district properties. We identified 2 of them. I believe that we'll have a lease on the 17 Industrial Drive property, in the next day or two. once we get it in the office. The other thing is that, we've talked about co-location of public safety, and on other projects in the area, we've always built the tower slightly taller so that we can have those whip antennas and on the antennas off the top of the tower for those type of applications. So I want to caution, or at least present this to the board to say that if we come in with Verizon going at 175 feet, for example, on their center line, that tower is going to be 180, 182 feet taller because we need to have separation to at least, in my limited or next to zero knowledge about RF, have some sort of separation between those different frequencies. And then finally, I will go back to the August meeting because I asked Kevin, and unfortunately the video and the audio wasn't retained for that because it just didn't work. But if you remember, there were members of this board that emphatically said to us, can you look at the industrial district? Can you look at the industrial district? Because we would look very favorably, and I'm sort of recalling what I heard, and I think it was a little bit stronger than that about how a request for variances would be treated if we came to you for variances on those parcels. Very favorably was my understanding. So, we've relied on what we've heard over the past couple months. We've taken what this board has had to say and tried to implement it, and that's what we need to do. What we'll do going forward, with the due diligence that we usually do. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeannie, Mike Ivino, Town Board.
Yes, Mike.
Could somebody clarify for me Andrew Campanelli's comment in the chat? The federal shot clock will continue to run unless the applicant expressly agrees to toll the clock.
Hi, Mike, John Lyons.
Thank you, John.
I think I generally agree with that. I think if we were to proceed along the path that Scott has suggested, procedurally, the way that I think I would want to do that would be to ask Scott to send a letter into the board on behalf of the applicant asking that that the Mount Marion site be tabled, assuring the board that the that the shot clock would be tolled while that application is tabled, and then we would have something in the record going forward just to say that that issue was addressed at this juncture. Does that help, Mike?
Yes, it does.
I would like a definition of the word tolled.
We don't have to use told, but held conveyance. Told is lawyer lingo, but we can come up with the idea is Holly mentioned tabling, and that's the idea that we're talking about just setting that application aside, as Scott said, maintaining the status quo so that you don't lose the effort and that's been put into it thus far, and then to provide some time to see what happens with regard to investigating these other sites.
Right. Without repercussions.
Yeah,
Yes.
Without there being any detriment to either the board or
to
the,
either side.
Yep.
Right. But it is equivalent with the shot clock being stopped, paused, correct?
Yes.
Is that right, Mr. Olson? Is that how you see it also?
I do, as well as if you were to close the public hearing and if you have a requirement that a decision be made in 62 days, we would obviously, agree to toll or pause that as well. This is not a getcha type of game.
No, I just wanted to clarify definition.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for clarifying. And thank you for asking, Mike. So what is the will of the board?
I think we've set a good tone here, Gene, and I think we should continue as Scott suggested and table what we have to.
And
Okay.
let them pursue the what they
Yeah.
need to do on the property number 17 on Industrial Road, and let them present that to us when they have it. Is that what you suggest, Scott? When you have more definitive information, you will send it to us?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, we will begin working on it, the more detailed analysis as soon as possible.
Okay.
But
And by the way, thanks to Sarah and to Mike and to you for getting this to us, even in that draft form before we put it out, because it was just, we didn't know if it was ever going to amount to anything. But thanks for pursuing it, quite honestly.
You're welcome.
okay, then if you proceed with this, what is the analysis that you're going to do of the site? What's the plan in your mind? Do you like my ideas, or do you want to do with your ideas? Just so I'll know what to expect, or the board will know what to expect. What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, are you asking me? I didn't understand exactly what you were talking about in terms of the simplicity of the analysis, but I'm not an engineer, so I was just hoping that Mike understood it and figured that he can work with you on that. But I do know that you had at least 5, I'll say, questions or requests for additional information. I think we would need to, like Mike said, address those also with you, in addition to providing that simplified analysis.
And I just play an engineer on TV, so I'm doing my best here. And what I would hope is that the simplest comparison for the board, as I said, just to look at coverage, and then if it looks close, we can take it from there. I know Mike is going to work on capacity issues probably. And the important thing of when you talked about the antenna types, lovely things to talk about. But as I said, I didn't see any technical reasons why other things couldn't be done. There's a lot of ways to peel a peach. In this case, there's a lot of ways to get coverage out of a site, no matter how high it is. And that would be the best thing. But I do like the KISS principle, though, is because of the board, to keep it as simple as possible. And then it also makes it easy for me because I don't always understand. No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah, and perhaps if there are any questions, the 2 engineers can get together, because you certainly don't need me intervening in it, because like I said, I didn't even understand what you're asking for. So,
Scott, can I make a suggestion? I think that the chance for this to move forward as expeditiously as possible is going to be served best by having us all on the same page, so that we're minimizing going back and forth. Here's what I was thinking about this. I've asked you to send a letter to the board, proposing going forward on this path and tolling the clock and whatnot. And perhaps also it might make sense, if you're able to do that before the next ZBA meeting in February, to include in your letter, probably with Mike's help, just a description of what you intend to do. You have Ron's comments from tonight, and you also have the comments from his December 27th letter. And if you can put those together, and you can even talk to Ron if you want to in the interim, but if you include with your letter sort of a proposed plan, and then we can take a look at that and digest it and be able to say maybe at the February meeting that, okay, now we actually have an agreed upon package, what the parameters are going to be for what you're going to do next. And then you just go out and do it and submit it. And that seems, and then the board can take a look at it. And that seems like the way to move forward without the minimum of sort of back and forth about whether things are sufficient or to be included.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't know how quickly we're going to be moving. I know that obviously this is a little bit of a sidestep from where we are, so it's going to add a little more time. So I know we want to get this done quickly. A lot will depend on Mike's schedule. We'll talk about it, obviously, but we're going to move as quickly as we can, is what I'm trying to say. We may actually have I'll have a letter together quickly, and we may have it much sooner than your next February meeting. So we might want to have some maybe interim discussions just to, so we can get started before then. And again, I'm just kind of throwing it out because I haven't had a chance to talk to the rest of my team.
Yeah, we can do that. I just want to have a mechanism by which you share the parameters of your package with us. That's something that we can distribute to the board. It's in writing. It becomes part of the record. And then we're all moving forward, sort of working off of the same sheet music.
No, I think that sounds fine.
I would only request that for the sake of the hardworking board, that we set a date of, and I'm going to say the 22nd of January for the last date for submissions so that they can be sent to the entire board and the entire board has time to read them and absorb them. We do our best work that way. I'm sure you do too. If you get work an hour before showtime, it's a little hard to be on your best performance. And we really believe in due diligence for you and for the community, for the public. We're really trying to do the best thing for everyone. And I know this has been going on for a long time, Mr. Olson. It's almost 2 years now since you first submitted the application. So we are moving, and we were not the ones who did not come back for 6-7 months. We were here. You weren't.
Oh, I understand. You haven't heard any complaints from us about that.
So I am very glad to hear we understand each other about the shot clock.
We do.
Good.
Excellent. Okay, so I think, thank you, John. I think we have beginnings of a plan here. Am I correct? Everybody seeing the same thing, hearing the same thing?
Yes.
So we'll be looking for some additional information. In the meanwhile, we'll put out that information on lot number 17 so that the public has a chance to see it. And Kevin will talk to you about getting that up on the website along with some other stuff. And we will proceed. It's a new year, right?
I have a question, if I may. And if this is a new property, would a new 500-foot letters be in order that other people would?
We're not at the point of having a public hearing on that yet. There hasn't been enough information.
Yeah, right now, Kevin, this is just a record that's been accepted in connection with the Mount Marion Fire Department application. And, so it's part of that right now.
Understood.
It's available to the public as part of that record.
Okay.
Okay.
Phew. Happy New Year, everybody.
And they were originally sent out, Kevin, long ago. Happy New Year. Does anyone have anything else you'd like to say? If not, from the ZBA only, I will take a motion to adjourn, although the rest of you may raise your hands too.
So moved.
Patty, moving to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Don't take that as eagerness.
Is there any discussion? Thank you, Henry. Is there any discussion? I thought not. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm not even going to do a voice vote.
9
I
o'clock
am
on
going
the
to do a
nose.
voice vote.
Thank you, everybody, for participating, and to the public who didn't speak, but I think they have a pretty good sense of where we are going with this. So
Making good progress.
yeah, it was.
I think so. We do our best.